I'm joined now by Chief Washington correspondent and author of the new book, Retribution, Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America, Jonathan Karl. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, so this book is entitled Retribution. Obviously, we're seeing the extent to which that's playing out right now. We've seen indictments against James Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton. Were these indictments surprising to you? And beyond that, do you think there is an extent to which Donald Trump is going to, at any point, curb his thirst for vengeance as he continues to move forward in his administration?
I see no signs of curbing that thirst for vengeance. And it's not just the indictments. I mean, it's the way he's gone after the major law firms, the universities, the way that he has, both courted and threatened the tech companies. You remember when he left the White House, he was effectively a pariah. He was banned on social media. Major corporations in this country were saying that they were not doing any donations to Republicans who supported him in overturning or trying to overturn the 2020 election. And of course, he faced all those criminal indictments, the impeachments, and all of that. So his retribution is beyond DOJ. DOJ is a key part of it. Am I surprised? No. He made pretty clear this is what he wanted to do, and then he put into positions of authority people who had explicitly said that they were going to do this. Kash Patel, first and foremost, as the director of the FBI.
So much of the Republican brand was predicated on this idea that they were against the weaponization of government. And now not only are they okay with weaponization of government, but they're barreling ahead, to your exact point, having put people in power whose sole raison d'etre is basically to just seek vengeance against their political opponents. And so does there seem to be, in your conversations with folks you've spoken with, does there seem to be any bristling happening among folks on the right, among these Republican elected officials who, again, put so much of their brand into this idea that they were against it back when Democrats were in power?
Certainly nothing, almost nothing publicly. Privately, yes, some, that there's some, mostly that it's not an effective political strategy. Not that it's wrong or that it's, an abuse of federal power. Really what you hear is, this is, people want us to concentrate on the economy, on crime, on the border, on the other things that Donald Trump talked on, campaigned on. The thing is, he did campaign on retribution, not just in the beginning, when he said, "I am your retribution" at that famous speech at CPAC shortly after he announced his campaign, early 2023. His first rally is at Waco, Texas, explicitly making the comparison. Or I should say implicitly, but others talked about it explicitly, the comparison between what happened at Waco, Texas, with the federal showdown with the Branch Davidians, seen by the far right as a great symbol of the federal abuse of power. This is core to what he campaigned on, and you certainly don't see anybody pushing back in any significant way in his administration. One thing that did happen was when the Comey indictment came down, before it came down, when it was in the process of coming down, the leadership of the Justice Department did gently push back and say this is not a fully baked case. We shouldn't go forward, at least not at this time. That was Pam Bondi. It was Todd Blanche, number 1 and 2 at DOJ. But Trump barreled ahead. It was because of Trump that that you now have Lindsay Halligan, the top prosecutor in one of the most important U.S. attorney's offices in the country, and leading not just the indictment of Comey, but the indictment of Tish James, and the suggestion that there are a whole list of others that it could be indicted soon as well.
Well, isn't this kind of a leopards eating faces party type situation? Because the irony of all of this is that the reason that there won't be any pushback, or any vocal pushback at least, is because those very people who are enabling this retribution tour right now know that if they do speak out, that they'll be on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, because it's you raise a very important point, which is that the retribution, which right now we see, aimed at Tish James, also Comey. Comey, let's not forget, is a Republican, or always was a Republican, served
right.
Republican administrations, also worked in Democratic administrations, but he is a lifelong, or was a lifelong Republican. But very high on the list of enemies for Donald Trump, and explicitly placed out by, Kash Patel famously in his book, are Republicans. I mean, one person that Steve Bannon has suggested recently should also be indicted is Bill Barr. Donald Trump's
that
former
crunchy liberal
General.
Bill Barr.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's nobody that Democrats hated more than Bill Barr, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And then
he committed the cardinal sin of saying that Donald Trump's stolen election claims during the 2020 election were bullshit.
He did the cardinal sin of telling the truth about the 2020 election and doing so without any hedging whatsoever. And that's why they want to actually, indict him.
Well, you had spoken about a number of officials in the book who were instrumental in kind of playing a key role amid the infighting as Trump built out his administration from Mar-a-Lago. Can you talk about the role that Steve Bannon, Kevin McCarthy, and Pete Hegseth played?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to really get the behind-the-scenes version of what was actually going on after Trump re-won the White House and began the transition, mostly headquartered out of Mar-a-Lago, which, by the way, is not a very big place. It's a private club. It's not there's no office space to speak of at Mar-a-Lago. Trump has an office. That's kind of it.
I mean, if there was office space, he probably wouldn't have put boxes of classified documents next to the toilet.
Exactly. And there is a big Trump transition office, or there was, which was with the old campaign headquarters a couple of miles away in West Palm Beach. But Trump wasn't going to go there, and everybody knew that the only way to really make inroads in the transition to get a job, a significant job in the White House, was going to be to go to Mar-a-Lago and get FaceTime with Donald Trump. So I went and described this scene, which was, there was first of all, I should say there was a perception, and there was some analysis early on, not very good analysis, I don't think, that Trump's second transition was so much more smoothly run than his first. That Susie Wiles had really, imposed some discipline. They were getting their announcements out much earlier. There was a real process in place. I mean, no. There was maybe less public drama, and Susie Wiles does a great job of limiting that. But it was the Wild West at Mar-a-Lago of Trump kind of making up his mind on the fly to make picks. I mean, you didn't mention Gates. Matt Gates was decided basically, without even anybody, being in the loop on this. Trump just that was a Steve Bannon thing. Steve Bannon had no role in the transition, but he was a monumental influence in that transition. I mean, a big reason why Kash Patel is the FBI director, that Gates was chosen, obviously it failed, he ultimately withdrew, was because of Bannon. Scott Bessent was a major Steve Bannon guy, came on the scene through Bannon's War Room podcast. And, Bannon, actually, I write about, I spent some time in Mar-a-Lago during this time, obviously, and trying to, think not just for the daily reporting, but I knew I wanted to actually try to describe the scene that was going on. I described what some people down there called the alternative or the real transition, which was a group of real MAGA, hardcore Trump acolytes who operated off of a yacht just about a little ways away, the Intercoastal Waterway. The yacht was owned by a retired coal magnate. His name is John Rich. I actually visited this yacht, talked to people there. They would have meetings there. They would have after parties after dinner at Mar-a-Lago. And it was this little core of people pushing for various folks in the administration that was making the case for some of the most hardcore MAGA right nominee that Trump ultimately chose.
Well, it sounds like there was a lot of jockeying and trying to prove their loyalty to Donald Trump. I mean, look, we had opened this conversation talking about the very concept of retribution, the title of the book, and I had asked kind of incredulously why people would, on the right in this movement that, again, stakes so much of their identity on their disdain, their purported disdain for the weaponization of government. But it sounds like the reason that they're okay with it is just because this administration was just built up of people who had spent all of this time jockeying for position and showing proving their loyalty to Donald Trump. And so that's why they're perfectly content to contract away all of their purported values and instead just do whatever Donald Trump tells them he wants them to do.
I mean, the hypocrisy on this point is obvious, but I think that a lot of these folks actually don't see the hypocrisy. I mean, some do, and they say, who cares? We're in a fight, and we're going to use whatever tools we want. But in the mindset, it is rooting out and punishing those who weaponize the government. So you're weaponizing the government to neutralize the people that weaponized the government. I mean, right. It's you kind of get it. You have to get into the mindset. And this is what, this was the case that was made by some of Trump's most loyal supporters, the few people that really stuck with him after in the immediate aftermath of him leaving the White House. The problem here is not just the Democrats that impeached him. It's not just even the prosecutors that indicted him. It's the Republicans who didn't sufficiently defend him and who made this all possible.
Right. This is a message to other Republicans that he will accept total loyalty and nothing else. To that point, is there any sense that these people truly believe that the government was weaponized against Trump, or that what they're doing right now is actually being done in good faith? I mean, like, these people have to be smart enough to understand that the objective reality that Trump didn't win the election, and there's a big part of me that also believes that Trump himself is smart enough to understand. Is this kayfabe? Is this just a bit they're all playing so that they can kowtow to Trump, or did you get any sense, in your interactions with these people, that they're true believers, that they really believe the 2020 election was stolen, and that they have to take these extraordinary steps in order to neutralize those Democrats and Republicans who had been there looking to weaponize the government against Donald Trump, who was completely innocent?
Don't underestimate the power of the reality distorting apparatus that has been built up over the last several years. Look, clearly there are people that know the gig. And by the way, one of the things the January 6th committee, did with the power of being able to compel people to testify, was to get a whole long list of people around Trump to say under oath that no, the election was not stolen. I didn't see any evidence the election was stolen. That includes people that were there with him at the White House. That includes the people that were running his campaign. And they finally, gig is up. I'm under oath. No, I saw no evidence that the election was stolen. By the way, all of those people are gone. They are not back. Yeah. Those people are done. And so now that you have to kind of go along with it. So there certainly are people that are kind of cynically or, just saying, I'm doing what I have to do. But let's go one rung beyond that. I mean, you go out and you talk to Republican voters, people that really love Donald Trump, who don't have a job at stake, and you find people who truly believe that the election was stolen. The repeating of the lie over and over and over again has really sunk in. And you have people saying, you really think that Joe Biden could have beaten Donald Trump? You really believe that? There's no way. I mean, it's in the head. I'm not saying that they, buy into some of the kookier conspiracy theories about dead Venezuelans rigging voting machines, but they think that the election was rigged in some way. They buy into, Trump's repeated, allegations about paper ballots or whatever. I mean, so I think that there are a lot of people in this country, and yes, some in the senior positions at the White House and the Justice Department, who do actually believe this stuff. I'm not saying, I mean, there are clearly many that don't, but I think that the lie has taken hold, and it might, frankly, at this point, I cannot read Donald Trump's mind. I have strong evidence that after the election, he knew he had lost in 2020. But I think that in his own head, he's now fully come to believe it. Believe that he won. Believe that he won.
That was going to be my next question. You had mentioned Steve Bannon and his outsized influence in building up this administration. Steve Bannon came out a few days ago and suggested for the umpteenth time already that Donald Trump is going to be president in 2028, that they're going to find some maneuver to get him in. Trump has since kind of, flirted with it and then walked back. I mean, whatever Trump says about this issue, like all other issues, is just kind of the product of whatever, the last person he spoke to, or some fleeting, errant synapse that fires in his brain, and that's just his decision for the day, and it can change tomorrow or the next day. Do you believe that Steve Bannon is telling the truth? Do you have any concern that Donald Trump is going to, move forward and seek a third term in some untoward way or some constitutionally subversive way?
I don't think that Trump actually intends to do that. Could the situation kind of spiral and enough people tell him, oh my God, the people want you, the people need you, you got to do it again. I mean, I think that's possible, but I think that Trump's intention, right? As a matter of fact, I know because I've talked to people who are close to Trump, who are actually, friends with Donald Trump, who say that he has said privately, no, I'm done. I'm playing golf. I'm not staying. I'm not sticking around. But, Bannon's out there beating the drums on that. I think, by the way, that one of the reasons why Steve Bannon is saying that is not necessarily that he actually wants Trump to run for a third term, but he does not want J.D. Vance to get a head start at all. He's got, and a lot of this is public, he does not get along with J.D. Vance, so he wants to make it very difficult, if not impossible, for J.D. Vance to at some point step forward and saying, I'm starting my exploratory committee to run for president in 2020.
Right, because if there's this general sense that Trump may still be the guy, that effectively freezes the field.
Yeah, it's betrayal. If Trump hasn't, explicitly ruled it out and said, I'm retiring, and you're saying you're going to run, what? You're going to run? I mean, if he run, what are you saying? So yes, it freezes the field. And by the way, if you've noticed, maybe you haven't, because you have to really kind of burrow in, and I spend a lot of time burrowing into these places. But the other thing that Bannon has been doing lately is he's been increasingly critical of Marco Rubio, somebody who he had come to accept as a fellow populist, despite his history as a neoconservative and his advocacy of immigration amnesty and all those things that he did earlier in his Senate career. But Bannon now has become increasingly critical of Marco Rubio over what is happening in Venezuela. Bannon, as a America first, meaning essentially an isolationist foreign policy, is horrified to see a military buildup around Venezuela. It doesn't fit with what he believes an America first foreign policy is. And he blames not Donald Trump for that, because Bannon never blames Donald Trump for anything. He blames Marco Rubio. Because Rubio is the biggest advocate for what's happening. At least that's the case Bannon is making.
John, while you were writing this book, Retribution, what was the most striking part of it to write?
Well, it was a couple of things. One was certainly that whole scene around the transition, and I found out, as you'll see, there is some pretty wild reporting about what was going on and the jockeying to put together the Trump cabinet. But the other thing is the actual Trump-Biden relationship, because I spent a great deal of time dissecting and reporting on the half dozen or so times that Donald Trump and Joe Biden actually interacted in privately. The first one privately after the shooting in Butler. The first time was that day. A phone conversation. I talked to people that overheard the conversation, so I have a very good sense of what happened in that phone call. I have a very good detailed description of their interactions when Trump came to the White House after the election. You remember he met for 2.5 hours with Trump without any cameras present in the Oval Office, and also their interactions on 3 occasions on January 20th, the day of the inauguration. And Trump is as warm and friendly, like treating Biden like he's an old friend and he admires him. And if it weren't for politics, we'd be good friends. Very gracious towards Jill Biden. And by the way, Joe Biden's also equally gracious back to Donald Trump, completely at odds with what we were seeing play out and what we're seeing play out now in front of the cameras. So that was quite interesting. Also the interaction of Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama as they were trying to find a way to deal with the fact that they and so many other Democrats believed that Biden just had to get out of the race. Yeah. How they could nudge him out without doing it in a publicly frontal way, how they really wanted to avoid a coronation for Kamala Harris, and those interactions, absolutely fascinating.